Hello everyone, this is update for November 2022, day 252 of the war and of the date update. So first, with the first update is going to be about attacks on energy infrastructure. So I mentioned that on the early morning night between first and second, there was another attack. It was actually aimed at military assets, Ukrainian military assets. So it wasn't aimed at distribution network. Doesn't mean that this is not going to continue. Just temporary reprieve, basically, from all of this. And if you probably follow the news, there are a lot of reports and rumors that there are more Iranian drones are coming, more powerful, and also missiles similar to like Soviet .U. They basically cheap replacement for Russian-made missiles because those are extremely expensive and it is extremely hard to get electronics for those. So Russia tries to use them sort of sparingly, and so they want to basically replace them with sort of cheap-made, less precise, and so on Iranian rockets, and sort of achieve the same results. So we'll see if that that's true. Totally possible, uh, as I said before, Ukrainian government doesn't, or Ukrainian military doesn't have any adequate response or strategy against those attacks. So it will be totally at mercy of Russia to do what they want, basically by attacking that continuing attack energy infrastructure. And um, as I said before, it's literally on the edge. Probably another day or two of successful attacks, similar to what we've seen, and it will collapse into the sort of pieces, as I said before. Then let's actually discuss a little bit of what's going on around Ukraine politically, internationally. I mentioned before the situation is politically changing, not in favor of Ukraine around the world, in the West, let's put it this way. Uh, and as I said before, the reason is mostly problems with inflation in the West that are tightly connected in consciousness of average person in the West to Russia's war against Ukraine, which is it's sort of aggravating factor of the problems, but the root cause, the real problems, the source of the problem is far away from Russia's war against Ukraine, from the situation in Ukraine. This was just additional sort of pain point, but not the main one. But nevertheless, the average sort of person in the West thinks that this is related to that, and as you can see in the polls, the support is definitely dropping. To support to continue helping Ukraine in its effort to defend itself against Russia. And for example, why I'm mentioning this, because there is another country where elections are looming, which is Austria. And their Freedom Party looks like it may win or be number two. So essentially, they will have heavy influence on the politics in Austria, and that really means that they definitely favor sort of relationship with Russia, no sort of basically renewing relationship with Russia, close ties to Russia. And that's why I said before that this whole idea about the energy embargo is, backfiring in a royal way, because it it gives ammunition to parties like this Freedom Party, where okay, if there were no problems with the Russian supply of energy, they would have no sort of campaigning point, right? Because okay, it comes, so that's not the problem. The problem is really uh, Russia's political decisions, right? Not the energy. Unfortunately, that's not how it's sort of being done in the West. Related to this Russian energy supply and shortages of thereof in the West. So the um, French glass producer called Duralex stopped obviously glass production. So that's another casualty of this whole situation of this misguided energy policy in Europe and in generally in the West. Uh, for example, in US, it's another sort of example of why this is really creating big problems. Uh, in in the US, there are acute shortages of diesel fuel, and the inventory are at the record low. I think there's like 20 days of inventory um, available, especially on the east coast of the US. And all of this is actually a result of the, again, war on conventional energy, misguided energy policies, which then lead to the fact that energy producers, they don't invest in capacity, right? So the capacity in US is going down, installed capacity. Utilization is very high, but the installed capacity is going down, especially on the East Coast. And then it's becoming dependent on diesel fuel, specifically like on import of diesel fuel, right? There is some supply from like Texas area, from Louisiana, all of that those places, but they don't cover the needs because, as I said, there is not enough processing capacity, right, to produce the product. And the other source to cover this shortage was actually Russia. Russia was exporting diesel fuel to East Coast US. And you can even see whoever lives in New Jersey, there is a Lukoil gas stations because they sort of try to build footprint in the US as well. So that diesel fuel is essentially gone, and there is shortage, right? There is, and Europe needs itself, like, so there is not enough in Europe because and Europe is kind of like geared towards using mainly diesel fuel. So there is in a way kind of like distribution or how to say kind of like a distribution of roles between US and Europe. So US is geared to use more gasoline, but mostly for passenger cars, right? And then obviously for anything that's delivering goods and everything, it's all diesel fuel. And then Europe is other sort of side. They heavily use diesel fuel for everything from trucks to passenger cars, right? And so they have surplus of gasoline, which they would send to US, and US would some in the good times would send surplus of diesel fuel, and then eventually it was due to shortage of this capacity, the sort of supplier went to the supplier become Russia in Europe as well. So as you can see, this is where this policy leads in. It kind of basically gives all of the sort of priority opportunities to Russia. And the problem is all of this diesel fuel in the US and specifically US East Coast is that in the northeast of US, about 18% of homes, the way they heat them, the homes is by burning diesel fuel. It's called heating oil in the US, but it's actually diesel fuel. It's the same thing. This because there is difference in prices, so it's kind of like intentionally done to confuse people, thinking that they are different, so that they don't, because heating oil is a little bit cheaper, so they don't use heating oil to basically for the trucks and stuff like that. So, but essentially there could be sort of problem in this way in the US as well. So it's not just, let's say, Europe. US may see equally bad consequences because just think about this: if there is no diesel fuel, all of the like food, everything is being supplied using trucks in the US or railroad, the same. It's largely diesel trains, and all of that, if there's shortage, you don't get supply of things. And I'm not saying this is imminent, but it's, the situation is definitely not good. Let's put it this way. Then, in terms of what Russia does with its crude, for example, there's new statistics. Russia is the largest supplier of crude to India. So, if you remember, it actively started exporting to India sometime in May, and then really ramped it up in June of this year, and it remains number one supplier ahead of Saudi Arabia to India, delivering around like slightly less than 1 million barrels per day. And just a reminder, Russia produces 10.7 million right now. But there is sort of news to all of this is that starting, I think, December 5, there is sort of complete embargo on export of Russian crude, including to the US and Europe, which will remove roughly 1 million barrels of the supply. So as a result, when the price of everything, crude, gasoline, diesel, will go higher again. Not to mention that the way which the West was living right now is and sort of like the prices are not as high is because US is releasing a lot of crude from its strategic petroleum reserves, and in that way it's keeping in a way artificially a low price for the crude oil. And then there is another problem that those reserves are also at record low, right? US cannot continue that. It's just simply not sustainable for the US to do that in the long run, not even in medium run. It's short-term solution, and that may run out soon. So this all leads to the situation to could be very explosive situation in the winter, sometime after New Year, once this whole ban goes into effect and prevents Russian crude from going to the west. So that's that situation with and this all ties back into the inflation in the West, right? Because there is a lot of people expecting that, let's say, Federal Reserve is about to pivot and it's going to pivot and all of that, and it's just not going to pivot because structurally there are structural problems, which, as I said before, with the supply in the West. And for that reason, the prices will remain, inflation will remain elevated. And the only way that Fed can sort of fight it is by increasing interest rates. So they increased today, and if you don't know, to by 75 basis points. So basically, it's 0.75% to between 3.75 and 4%. And in a way, they have no choice, right? And as I said before, they in a way don't belong to themselves. They have to do it, or like financial system will start really crumbling and collapsing. Then let's actually switch to another. So I spoke about Austria, right, where there is a chance of more pro-Russian party winning. There's another country where it's already happened. It's Israel. There, Benjamin Netanyahu, his party won, and I think he's going to be prime minister again. And he's very good and close friend of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So again, you see shift in the direction that sort of definitely not helpful to Ukraine. Not that Israel was helping Ukraine. It definitely wasn't, but there were hopes that it may change stance based on all of this Iran involvement, which I think they were absolutely ungrounded hopes. But there is even problem that Israel may help Russia. I'm not saying that this is happening, but anything is possible. Let's put it this way. Now let's go to the grain deal. So basically, Russia sort of got back into the grain deal today, and so the export sort of renewing. Their official explanation is just complete garbage. Let's put it this way. The reality is that there were negotiations between Turkey and Russia, and there's sort of like a meeting of 2 points where Turkey put really heavy pressure on Russia to allow export of Ukrainian grain, because the largest buyer, well, not the largest, but second largest buyer of Ukrainian grain is actually Turkey. It's buying 14% of Ukrainian grain. The number one is actually Spain, which was 18%. And so basically, Turkey is having sort of call it like a cottage industry there, where it buys this grain, and specifically wheat, turns it into flour, use it by itself, but also exports it to the Middle East. And apparently, Turkey is a big exporter there, and it's more value-added product, more profit, and it helps uh, Turkish economy, Turkish industry, Turkish business, right? So uh, Turkish president is very sort of, how to say, protective, and tries to help its own business and its economic sort of economic position of Turkey. I'm not saying he's totally misguided on sort of fiscal policies and many other things that like lead to horrific inflation and sort of potential looming disaster in the financial system. But in this kind of primitive way, he's just like, okay, it's my territory, it's my business, it's my money. You need to let it happen. In return, it's very unclear what happened, but Russia gets some concessions on export of its grain as well. Because I said before, the reason Russia was unhappy with this deal is it did not work out for Russia from perspective of exporting its grain. It was very sort of like kind of like a gray schemes that made it very uncompetitive, or Russia had to sell it at low price, and there is no margin, unlike like crude oil, where there is huge margin for Russia. In grain, there is not that huge of a margin there. And Russia has a record actually crop of grains, 150 million tons. That means like wheat, corn, all of the peas, everything you can sort of imagine. All of that is 150 million tons, which is really large, and they definitely want to get money for that and export it. So they're looking for those opportunities. So that's how it kind of worked out, that Turkey got it what it wants, and Russia kind of probably got better terms, better deal, to be able to export its own grain. So that was kind of like the essence of this, what happened there. And so for now, this creates a little bit sort of better situation for Ukrainian economy, and obviously helps Russia. Now let's switch to the situation on the battlefield, as we always do. Start from the very top and then move in a clockwise fashion. So the situation along the state border is fairly quiet. There are some exchanges of artillery fire, but relative to the previous warnings, it's pretty quiet. Now let's quickly jump to North Luhansk front line. Since here are sort of stable without really much changes. Some Ukrainian attacks, as you can see here, to attack in direction of Kremina. Now it's a little bit changed because before, if you remember, there were attacks directed in this kind of like a curve here that river creates. I think it's the village there is Krasnopopivka. So it's a little bit changed, but obviously those attacks are not successful. As I said before, Russian troops are getting more soldiers, more boots on the ground. So that will create very big difficulties for Ukrainian side to do any offensive action, especially given the very like low skills, basically lack of skills on Ukrainian side, and that is big sort of problem, or sort of kind of like a stone on the neck that doesn't allow Ukrainian side to realize some of the advantages it has, especially as I said in precise artillery systems. But basic situation is stable, no essential changes here. Now let's quickly jump to North Donbass, where Wagner mercenaries operating. These here are pretty much the same. Attacks in Solidar that don't go anywhere, attacks here in Bakhmut. So far, I would say, I'll actually kind of correct myself, because they don't go anywhere, but eventually then Ukrainian defenses crumble at some point. So, and then obviously Russian troops trying to sort of develop, improve situation, take advantage of this salient that they already built here, but so far today wasn't successful. Now let's quickly look at central Donbass front line. Things here are sort of more or less the same. Always this attacks out of the Pisky salient, where the Russian troops slowly creating worse and worse defensive position for Ukrainian troops. It's not sort of the end of the world, but situation is definitely moving in the wrong direction for Ukrainian side. Very slowly though, like at a snail pace, no question about it. Ukrainian side tried to counterattack, but as I said, the troops don't know how to do it. The commanders are totally, incompetent, and so as a result, those counterattacks go to nowhere. Then, typical attacks in Marinka, where situation is definitely better, where defensive situation here is much better for Ukrainian side. And then Russian attacks this here south of Novomikhailivka that so far were not successful. And then the final update here is this Pavlivka. If you remember, I think 2 or 3 days ago, there was initial success, but now it totally bogged down. So it's kind of turning into this where Russian troops sort of, they didn't get full control of Pavlivka, but they control southern part of the village for sure. And as I said before, they becoming sort of perfect target, because Vugledar is high ground, and like substantially high ground. So there is extreme visibility, especially at Pavlivka, which is kind of like in depression. So they're gonna just become perfect targets for the artillery, as long as it obviously works. But essentially, this is kind of like done situation there. Now let's quickly check Zaporizhya front line, where things never change. And today they haven't changed either. Now let's move to Kherson bridgehead. Things here are also stable, quiet. Russian troops are being replenished, and so opportunities for Ukrainian troops here are completely gone for now. And it's the situation, like this frontal attacks here are definitely not an option at all, because as I said, balance of power shifted into towards Russian side, and giving that lack of skills, lack of command skills on Ukrainian side in terms of doing attacks, they're going to be just simply suicidal. So what the Ukrainian side is doing, they continuing attack all of those ferries and pontoon bridges, which they did today. There is no information how successful it was. I'm pretty sure that something got hit. To what extent the damage is unclear, but essentially this is slowly but surely disrupting Russian supplies, and the more important that this ferries park and pontoon bridges park, because eventually there's enough of them will be destroyed, so you cannot replace them, and you're gonna get into a situation where you need to do something about the situation. So again, as I said, this bridgehead will eventually be lost by Russian troops, bearing situation, as I mentioned yesterday, potentially large Russian offensive that can potentially happen in January. That's most likely sort of timeline, but remains to be seen if that's gonna happen. Then this is just very initial preliminary thought based on what's going on the Russian side in terms of number of troops that they have. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.